Welcome to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit, the place where gearheads and policy hawks alike converge. On May 30th, 2025, President Donald Trump dropped a tariff bombshell, doubling the existing 25% levy on imported steel and aluminum to a steep 50%. This move, effective June 4th, 2025, was framed as a bid to safeguard American industry from foreign rivals. But it instantly sent shockwaves across the North American economic landscape, with Canada, America's trusted metal supplier and automotive ally, thrust into the eye of this trade hurricane. Prime Minister Mark Carney's swift response signals a robust defense of Canada's industrial backbone and global trade standing. Buckle up. Here are the high-octane developments fueling this escalating standoff. Let's fire up the first chapter and see how this trade drama unfolded. Revving up the trade war, Tariff Thunderstrikes North America. President Trump's decision to jack up tariffs to 50% was pitched as a national security measure, aiming to fortify American manufacturers and breathe new life into domestic steel and aluminum plants. But this maneuver instantly rattled the finely tuned North American supply chains, especially Canada's, a country that pumps out around 15 billion Canadian dollars in steel annually and supports over 100,000 workers in this sector alone. The Canadian Steel Producers Association, led by Catherine Cobden, wasted no time warning of catastrophic fallout. Canada's aluminum sector, equally vital and with 94% of its output headed stateside, faces a similar body blow. Meanwhile, stateside critics warn these new tariffs could hike up costs for American manufacturers, think car makers and heavy equipment builders, sparking price hikes that could dent consumer wallets. As North American trade engines sputter under this abrupt policy jolt, it's clear we're in for a bumpy ride on the road to economic stability. But Canada wasn't about to idle in neutral. Let's see how they revved up their counterattack. Canada's Counterpunch, a bold retaliation blueprint. Prime Minister Carney's government didn't idle long. Canada announced its own set of defensive maneuvers, slapping a 25% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum imports, hitting about 29.8 billion Canadian dollars in goods. But the response isn't just a carbon copy of Washington's move. Canada is also fueling the launch of major infrastructure projects to future-proof its economy. Ottawa's nation-building push includes accelerated pipelines, nuclear energy investments, and new trade corridors that weave Canada closer to Asian markets, all with a focus on environmental stewardship and Indigenous partnerships. For automotive watchers like us at Piston Pundit, this pivot could reshape supply chain routes and car component flows in unexpected ways. Canada's message is clear. It's not just about tit-for-tat tariffs. It's about charting a resilient economic course that doesn't hinge solely on U.S. demand. Speaking of resilience, if you're finding these insights valuable, do us a solid. Hit that like and subscribe button. It fuels us to keep delivering top-notch updates for gearheads like you. Now let's shift gears into how Canada's oil sector plays into this high-stakes trade showdown. The oil Gambit, Canada's heavy crude horsepower. If steel and aluminum are the opening volleys, Canada's oil might just be the ace up its sleeve. As the world's fourth largest oil producer, Canada ships about 3.8 million barrels of crude daily to the U.S., a flow valued at a staggering $130 billion each year. For many American refineries, especially in the Midwest, Canada's thick, viscous crude is an irreplaceable feedstock. While an outright oil export ban is unlikely, the economies are too interlocked. Canada's hinted at flexing its energy muscle by redirecting flows to other global markets. Even a partial redirection could spark fuel shortages and price spikes, potentially draining $30 to $35 billion from the U.S. economy annually. This calculated oil card reveals just how intertwined these North American energy arteries are. And in this turbocharged trade spat, it's a potent reminder that Canada isn't afraid to downshift and throttle up its economic defenses. But Canada's plan doesn't stop at oil. They're laying new pipelines to power their next move. Shifting gears, the Trans Mountain expansion. Canada's determination to steer away from an over-reliance on the U.S. market comes into sharper focus with the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project. This massive endeavor ramps up capacity from 300,000 to 890,000 barrels per day, turbocharging Canada's access to Asian markets. It's a clear signal of Canada's intent to strengthen ties with economic heavyweights like China and India. Recent trade data already reflects this pivot. In March 2025, China's oil imports via Canada's Pacific ports surpassed 7 million barrels, making China a leading buyer of Canadian crude. For Canada's automotive sector and broader economy, this pivot means diversifying customers and creating new trade routes, a win for long-term stability. At Piston Pundit, we see this pipeline expansion as more than just a flow of crude. It's about safeguarding Canada's economic horsepower against sudden tariff shocks from the south. By building out robust infrastructure, Canada can ensure that even if trade turbulence hits the North American supply chain, its energy sector has new lanes to cruise. So what's the bottom line? Let's crunch the numbers and weigh the economic impact of this high-octane standoff. The financial impact, counting the costs. As these tariffs throttle cross-border trade, the economic fallout can't be ignored. Canadian manufacturers, from auto parts suppliers to steel fabricators, are bracing for impact as U.S. access becomes more constrained. On the flip side, American industries that lean on Canadian imports face potential bottlenecks and rising production costs. These intertwined supply chains are like a finely tuned engine. One misfire, and the whole system sputters. Here at Piston Pundit, we know this could mean fewer parts for North American car makers and a slowdown in assembly lines, a direct hit to enthusiasts and workers alike. Canada's proactive approach, investing in infrastructure and diversifying markets, suggests it's not just idling through this trade turbulence. Meanwhile, the U.S. gears up for the 2026 elections, where voters will undoubtedly weigh the domestic impact of protectionist policies. As trade hawks and auto pundits alike debate the future, one thing's for sure. This isn't just a policy squabble. It's a real-world drama playing out in every garage and assembly plant. And that brings us to the final pit stop in this journey. Let's map out where the road leads from here. Conclusion: navigating the high-octane road ahead. The trade standoff between the U.S. and Canada has turned into a true test of North America's economic endurance. Canada's sharp counterpunch, tariffs, energy diversification, and fresh trade corridors shows it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving in a turbocharged global economy. On the American front, those 50% tariffs may end up shifting the balance under the hood, with higher costs and potential shortages sparking fresh debates in the political pits. It's clear that this isn't just a steel and aluminum spat. It's about the future of integrated trade, shared supply chains, and the engines of industry that keep North America rolling. Before we hit the brakes, we'd love to hear from you. How do you think Canada's new export routes and retaliatory moves will shape the automotive scene? Will these trade shocks drive innovation in the North American car industry, or stall progress? And what's your take on whether tariffs are truly the answer for revitalizing domestic production? Shift those thoughts into gear and drop your insights in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions help fuel the conversation. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always tuned in for our next deep dive on the automotive world's twists and turns. Thanks for making Piston Pundit your ultimate pit stop for everything that keeps North America's wheels turning. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.